Hey everyone, this is Jonathan from Chegg Tutors, and this lesson is about energy flow in an ecosystem. So first we have to think about what an ecosystem is. It's just all the components in a specific environment and how they interact with each other. So when we think about energy flow, it's how the energy is distributed and recycled throughout that ecosystem via plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi. So two rules to remember, very important in ecology, that everything is connected. So ecosystems want to remain in equilibrium, in that homeostasis state where everything is stable. So everything is connected to everything. Whether it be plants, animals, they all rely on each other in a certain way. The entire stability of the ecosystem relies on certain functions, and these functions are carried out by the species that are within that ecosystem. So everything plays a specific role in an ecosystem to keep it stable. And the second rule is energy must go somewhere. And you're probably thinking, well, that's obvious. But yeah, it's very important though, because either when we take in energy, we also put it out, and we can either put it out in the form of heat where it's unusable, and that's just any heat given off through respiration. So that's unusable energy. But then there's also energy that can be used by other animals or plants. So let's define some key things. So the first thing is producers. So these are just your green plants and algae that capture solar energy from the sun, which we can assume here is infinite, to make sugars via photosynthesis. And then you have your primary consumers. These are the next level that eat the producers. So these are your herbivores because they eat plants and algae. So these are rabbits, deer, anything that eats plants. So secondary consumers are the carnivores that eat the primary consumers. And tertiary consumers are the apex predators, the top of the food chain that eats the secondary consumers. Lions, cheetahs, leopards, all of those. And then we have decomposers, which consist of just fungi and bacteria that decompose dead plants and animals. They break them down. And this is essential for the recycling of any nutrients in an ecosystem, because we don't just want all these dead plants and animals just lying around. Instead, the fungi and bacteria decompose them and recycle their nutrients to be used by plants to keep the ecosystem in homeostasis. So now we can think about how the energy flows throughout an ecosystem. So first we have our producers, and they get their energy from the sun. The producers then pass along energy to what eats them. So basically, primary consumers. The primary consumers relay some energy to what eats them, so secondary consumers. And the secondary consumers relay their energy to tertiary consumers, because tertiary consumers eat the secondary consumers. Now, apex predators can also be secondary consumers. We don't need all these levels. There doesn't have to be 3 levels of consumer. Sometimes there's only 2. Just depends on what ecosystem we're talking about. So in every process, there's also heat that is dissipated. So this is just heat that's dissipated for any of the chemical reactions that occurs within those plants or animals. So some heat is lost every single time. So some of the energy is lost that then gets passed along. So at each level, you have, let's call this E1, so energy 1, so the energy of the producers, E2, E3, and E4. So at each level, you're losing energy as heat. So E2 is going to be less than E1, E3 is going to be less than E2, and E4 is going to be less than E3. So the tertiary consumers get the least amount of energy. Also, since we have our decomposers, which break down dead plants and animals, they get some energy too. So they get some energy from all of these guys. So energy is constantly being lost as you go down levels. As the energy flows through the ecosystem, energy is constantly being lost, which leaves the last consumers with the least amount of energy. So we can depict the energy flow in an ecosystem using an energy period, and I'll tell you why I also called it a biomass pyramid in 1 minute. So, like I said before, plants get their energy from the sun, and they are the starting points for the energy flow in an ecosystem. So they have the most energy. So they're at the bottom of the pyramid. So plants and algae, so we can call them producers. They pass along their energy to the species, to the type of animals that eat them. So the herbivores or primary consumers. And then the secondary consumers eat them. And then the tertiary consumers are at the top. So as you see, as you go up and up, you have less and less energy as you go up the pyramid, which is why the biomass of plants is the greatest. So highest biomass, because they have the most energy available, so that they can create the most biomass. That's why in an environment you don't have a lot of tertiary consumers. In an environment you always have more plants than you do, say, jaguars or something, because jaguars don't have enough energy to create all this biomass and populate as much, because they don't have enough energy available to them in an ecosystem. So you will always see tertiary consumers as less abundant than everything else, which is why they're so rare. They also have the lowest energy available. So I want to point out something that's pretty important here. These energy diagrams and the energy flow diagrams and the energy pyramids, they're not always this simple, because a lot of species of animals are both herbivores and carnivores, which are called omnivores, like humans. Humans eat both meat and plants. So it gets a little bit complicated when you have arrows, pointing to different things, because some species will be both primary consumers or secondary consumers. They can fill both roles because they eat plants and animals. So it gets a little bit complicated when you want to see the specific interactions of a specific ecosystem rather than generalize it into a pyramid. But it gets to be amazing when you start seeing these interactions of a specific ecosystem and how everything is connecting to everything. So there's all these lines all over the place with all the different species in an ecosystem, but they're all connected to each other. So it really shows you how all the animals and plants in an ecosystem are connecting to each other. So now let's talk about what might affect this homeostasis or equilibrium of an ecosystem. So, like I said before, everything's connected to everything. And if you start pulling out one species out of an ecosystem, other things start to fall apart. So say, for example, you pull out the plants of an ecosystem, all the plants, then the primary consumers die, then the secondary consumers die, and then the apex predators die. So everything's connected. So something like hunting could destroy an ecosystem because it causes an imbalance of that homeostasis. So if you overhunt apex predators, then the secondary consumers become way too overpopulated because the apex predators are not there to hunt them anymore. And then this overpopulation of secondary consumers leads to a whole imbalance in the ecosystem. So another one would be deforestation. When you start killing the niches of specific species in an ecosystem, you make those species go extinct, and deforestation does this a lot. It's caused the extinction of many species, and this causes huge imbalances to the homeostasis of an ecosystem. Another one that's going on is climate change. So I'm sure you can imagine that the warming of the earth is causing a lot of imbalances to ecosystems, causing a lot of extinction, which is basically ruining the entire energy flow diagram of specific ecosystems. So I hope this helped, and I hope it shows how important the balance of an ecosystem is and how everything plays a specific role that keeps an ecosystem in equilibrium. My name's Jonathan, and I'm on Chegg Tutors.